All righty, let's stop talking about the cat. Thank you for asking.
Thank you all for being here this evening. And we are going to start with prayer, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to do this evening. And mostly I'm going to do a little bit of teaching, but I'm going to do a lot of listening from all of you. So let us be in an attitude of prayer. Holy and just God, we gather tonight to learn more and to listen to each other, and to listen for the still speaking voice that helps us define what justice is and helps lead us to engage in that work. We thank you for the safe arrival of the participants tonight, and we ask that we feel your presence here as we learn together. We pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So thank you for being here. It is a requirement for a class, and it is a combination of kind of two areas of study, theology and leading the church in mission, which is really looking at how does the church work and run, and what makes it tick, what works, what maybe do we want to change, and so we're going to look tonight at what our own theology is around the idea of justice, and share some experiences of having done justice work and what your own experiences in that might be. We're not looking for solutions or what it is that we're going to do justice at Pilgrim, but really just to look at ways that you all have engaged in justice in the past, just as a reflection type idea. So on the 24th of September, during worship, we talked about what our 5 core values were. We invited people to take some time and be in discernment about where that passion might lie. And just as a review, those core values are Christ-centered, worship, hospitality, inclusiveness, and justice. And so it was interesting in my listening to people and where they felt that passion was how very interwoven those 5 core values are. I felt like, gosh, if you had to take one away, it would impact the other 4. And that was kind of my own observation from just kind of standing back and looking. But in looking at those 5 core values, we asked you to choose one, which was hard, of where you really felt that your passion lie. And in doing that, I picked one of those tonight, that core value of justice, to look at theologically first. Theologically, how do we theologically do justice here at Pilgrim? So, if you are anything like me, as soon as someone says theology, I go, I don't know anything about that. And I generally start every theology paper saying, I don't know anything about that. And then I start talking about it a little bit more, and I realize, oh yeah, okay, I do. So I want to break down what I mean by theology first. If you grew up, and we were talking a little bit before of how you grew up, if you grew up in a church in which there were creeds, like the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed, they talk about 4 marks of the church, 4 things that the church is. The church is one, the church is holy. What's the third one?
Catholic.
And the fourth
Apostolic.
one? Apostolic. That's right. And so, so it named the Nicene Creed, which is named that because it was a bunch of leaders who got together in Nicaea in 325 Common Era, and came up with this idea of what's the church going to be. It was amended then in 381 CE. So we say those words maybe without giving a whole lot of thought to what does one holy Catholic apostolic church mean. And if you didn't grow up in a creedal church, it may be the first time you're hearing that. So one, we are one church. Well, we are hardly one church. Look at all the denominations we have. Look at how many times Christianity has split. How many times denominations have split. But if you look at one and think about the idea of what is it that all Christians believe. So all Christians believe in a triune God. God Creator, Holy Spirit, God Creator, Jesus Christ, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And within that Trinity, there is communion. So there is communion within the Trinity, but then there is also communion within the churches. We are one. We are a community. Those communities look really different, but we are one as a community. Holy. You don't have to be in a church very long before you figure out that everyone in the church is not necessarily holy. We are all human, which prevents us from being completely holy, but we are working towards that perfection of Christ. So that holiness is that Christ is our center, and we are working towards being more Christ-like. Catholic, small c Catholic, meaning the universality of the church. From country to country, from culture to culture, if you name yourself Christian, there are some things that are universal. That is true about whatever you call church to be. And apostolic, that idea of being like the apostles. And Jesus said, go out and make disciples of all. If you compare Christianity with some other religions, you see that Christianity is a mission focused. So it's about going out. It's about not just being in a building. It's about going out. It's about, and it may be about getting new disciples, but it really is about being out in the world. The phrase is being in the world but not of the world. There's lots of debate for that, and that's another whole class. But we are called to go and be out in the world as the apostles went out. So, in doing that, we're not going to look at all 4 of those as they relate to justice. We're going to look at how we are one and how we are Catholic in the lens of justice. So let's back up and make sure that we're all defining justice in the same way. So if you were going to define justice, defining justice, how might you define justice?
Fairness.
Fairness, okay,
What's right?
okay,
It should be for all.
okay,
That's what equal comes to mind.
okay. And so, sometimes we think when we hear justice, we think about things like direct service. So I'll use the food pantry as an example. Some people would say that's justice work because we are making sure that everybody can have the food that they need. That's that. And in reality, what that is direct service work. It's not necessarily justice. In talking with Kelly, her example was, if you go back to the civil rights movement, if you were feeding the people that were going out to march, to protest, you were doing direct service work, but you weren't necessarily doing justice work. And justice work is actually addressing the systemic injustices and policies. So we may be doing direct service for the hungry in the food pantry, but when we write letters or when we say that there needs to be an increase in the minimum wage so that people can afford to buy, those are justice. They're more systemic versus direct service. And I'll use this word, so the sexiness of getting to feed somebody and know that they have a meal at the end of the day. Writing a letter, time after time, not seeing any change isn't nearly as sexy. And it can be exhausting. That justice work can be exhausting because it moves very slowly. And with that often comes fatigue. Like, I'm tired of, and I hear this from people all the time, how long? I included it in my prayer on Sunday. How long? How long do we have to keep doing this? Doesn't seem like anything's changing. And that lament is okay, but what do we do? Can we lament and then pick up and go and do that justice work again? The challenge in doing justice work is that it can be exhausting, can feel futile, but that's the real justice work. It's hard, it's slow, it's exhausting, but important, necessary, those things as well. So we're gonna start looking out here big at the church, and we're gonna come down closer to more individual stories about justice work. But thinking big, how are we as a community, as one, how are we as a community ensuring justice? That's part one. And part two is, how would we define one, being one Holy Catholic Apostolic? If we are saying we are one in doing justice work, what does that mean? What does that mean for Pilgrim? I would say, I'll start. I'll get it started, and maybe this will help. I would say part of being one is our communication of opportunities to engage in justice work. So the text messages that we send out, we don't send out to some, we send out to all. All have that opportunity to engage in justice work as a community.
think our membership in the Greater Cleveland congregations
Mhm.
is,
Yeah, that's a
An
bigger
expression.
community. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
we're part of that bigger community.
I think another thing that really helps us in our unity, although it's not exclusively aimed at justice, is the messenger and the Gabriel's trumpet.
Okay,
That
so,
really makes me feel and
Okay.
stay connected
okay,
to everybody. I think about that a lot, what a ministry that is that Brooke Willis
mhm.
puts together there. I'm so grateful for that.
Communication and publications.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Pilgrim being part of the greater UCC.
Okay,
So there's
Yeah.
lots of opportunities there, open to a much bigger community nationally.
and what I will share in that is, I realize how much more connected, because we're in the same town, as the national setting, we feel to that. Sometimes I listen to my classmates who feel very disconnected. That, you know, they're at that big office in Cleveland versus, oh, they're just over the bridge. And so, and I don't think it's only proximity. I think there is an effort within Pilgrim to feel, and I would venture, you know, obviously my history with Pilgrim's much shorter than anybody else in this room, but the connection that has existed between national office staff and Pilgrim
Oh, yeah.
also helps us feel part of the wider church. Yes, we still have a few members of national staff who attend here, but that's much, much smaller than it used to be, and yet we still feel that connection.
Because they're accessible to us.
They're real people.
Right.
They're real people.
And if we need someone to help us with our core values, guess what? We called on the church house
Yeah,
to help, you know, they send us folks.
yeah, yeah. Anything else in being one, that sense of unity in doing justice work?
Maybe setting up seminars or regional discussions about oneness in the church.
And I think what I hear you saying is that's something that we could do. Versus what is it that already makes us one in doing justice work?
Well, aren't we visible?
Okay, and tell me more about that, like where are we visible?
Well, like the Arts, Tremont,
Okay.
we're visible there.
Okay, and I like that, I'm gonna put our visibility in the community under Catholic, rather than under one. But I agree, that visibility of, we're not the pretty building at the corner of West 14th and Starkweather. While I'm gonna put it under Catholic, it could also be apostolic. We're out there. The visibility in the community says whether we are at the Tremont Arts Festival or Gay Pride Parade, we are still church, and we don't morph to fit into those. But we are respectful of what's happening in those areas. So visibility in the community, like I said, you could argue that one as well for apostolicity, but also that universality of we're not just here on Sunday mornings. As I hear Burning River band rehearsing upstairs, I would say our openness to space use also speaks to our justice of we are open to a broad range of people using our space while still holding to what our values are. I'm going to say space use diversity. But where else do we feel that kind of universality? And I guess what I'm going to encourage you to do is think about some of the other core values. In thinking about this, I thought, okay, this is where they all get really entangled. Because space use diversity speaks to our hospitality, speaks to our inclusiveness. So how else are we, are we relevant from, regardless of what that environment is?
Well, I don't know if this is one of them, but it doesn't matter what denomination you are. You can get married here.
Okay.
Would that be considered
that's
openness?
It is that inclusivity, it is that
Okay, yes,
universality.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I would say, how do I wanna say that?
Since we are open and affirming,
And-
that's inclusive of.
Yeah, but it is inclusive, but, so I would say the fact that we are an ONA church, speaks to the Catholicity of it, that universality, regardless of who you love, regardless, I know, that open and affirming is always considered only LGBT, but I really think that is broader, regardless of what your learning abilities are, regardless of what, but the fact that we're ONA speaks to our Catholicity.
Up there, we're in the one part. What about that time when Pastor John was here, when we wouldn't let any couples get married?
We wouldn't sign.
That justice
issue.
So, I don't know what that was called.
Refusal to sign.
Yeah,
Okay,
refusal to
thank you,
sign.
Pam.
Something like that.
So that's an example of, in our history, of the refusal to sign policy that was done being one. That wasn't something Pastor John made the decision about.
No,
That was done as a community of one. It wasn't made by one. It was done in community.
Excuse me, I'm not familiar with that idea. What was that about?
Does someone else want to? I know about it, but
Maybe
someone else.
speaks better, or Kathy.
Well, it was before the Supreme Court decision that LGBT can marry. And it was not only Pastor John, but Pastor Trish. She was
absolutely.
the associate at the time.
Correct.
They both decided that,
With us, I think.
that, we'll have a ceremony here like we do have our, what we used to call our ceremony.
Commitments there.
We will have a ceremony, but we will not sign the court order that you are married.
The marriage
So we'll-
license.
the marriage license, we will give it to you, and you will take it until all can marry here, till we
Mhm.
sign for everyone.
So there were weddings here,
Yes.
Mhm.
but there were not marriages here.
So what was the intent of not signing?
So we
Because
could-
he could only, we weren't one, they could only sign for
Heterosexual
couples, not
And
gay
until
couples.
all.
Until everyone agreed?
Until all could be married, until all who loved could be married in the
So
sanctity.
that was a unity issue?
That was a unity issue of being one in community, because there were people within the community here at Pilgrim who had long-term relationships, who, by the state of Ohio, because that's who issues it, has nothing to do with federal, by the state of Ohio were not allowed to marry, and yet a heterosexual couple who maybe had been together for 4 years or 3 years or however long could go down and have and sign. So they made the decision with the support of the community that they would sign no marriage licenses until all marriages were recognized. Does that help?
A little bit.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good example of the one. Anything else you want to add to the thinking about how we as Pilgrim are one or Catholic? Those are good ones that you've come up with. All right. So, yeah, I think that those, my question on the Catholicity is, how do we make sure that justice looks the same across the board? And I think the visibility in the community, the space use diversity, O&A, and if you think of others that maybe will do that. So,
We're ecumenical,
we're ecumenical, okay,
because we work with the other communities.
absolutely.
Didn't mean to make you get up.
Oh, you're
That
fine.
just came to mind.
All right. So that's you. So you just did theology. You just looked at what some of the theology. What are our beliefs about the church, and specifically about Pilgrim? What does our faith tell us about justice? Our faith tells us about justice that we are one in the ways that we do that, and that we are Catholic in the ways that we do that. So now we've been up here, we're looking at Pilgrim, and now Pilgrim is made up of people, and so we're going to bring it down and look at individual experiences of justice. And this is where storytelling comes in. I have paper if you want to write down thoughts or ideas. If you don't, they just come to you off the top of your head, that's okay too. But there are some questions I have for you that I want you to think about. Take a few minutes to just kind of reflect. And I'm looking for those personal stories. Maybe they were personal stories that you did in conjunction with Pilgrim, or maybe they had nothing at all to do with Pilgrim. But the first thing that I want you to think about is, what are some positive times that you have engaged in justice work? Tell me what those times were like for you. What was it that made it positive? You have paper, you don't have to write on that, I just, there you go.
We should write it down, or?
You don't have to, but if you are not, in no way are you required to write it down. But if you wanna make some notes like, oh yeah, I wanna make sure that I tell this, you don't need to write it down. We're gonna share, but I just thought if it was easier to jog your memory.
Well, this goes back when the earth was cooling down and pterodactyls were flying in the sky.
I love that time.
1968.
Okay.
I was a student at Bowling Green University.
I was there too, in '68.
Martin Luther King had not yet been assassinated. And we had marches in Bowling Green, which was basically Anglo. If you wanted to march, you had to sign an affidavit saying that if someone threw a brick at you, you did not throw the brick back. That was very, very, very scary.
Sure.
As a young guy, of course I thought I was invincible anyway, but still, I thought it would be right and just to throw the brick back. But according to the tenets of Martin Luther King, you weren't supposed to do that. I was more in line with Malcolm X at the time, because I wanted to respond to in kind. But I reluctantly signed this affidavit as we marched on Bowling Green, and it was rough, but we did it. I got hit a couple of times, and I'll tell you what, I wanted to pick that damn brick up and throw it back, but I did not.
Where, was it the townies? that were-
Townies.
Yeah, they were, you know, very,
Townies.
very redneck around Bowling Green.
And there was this, and I don't mean to bring color into this,
Oh,
but
no,
the United States is race-based anyway, so.
absolutely.
There were very few people of color
Oh, yeah.
in those days in Bowling Green. And they were behind the curve in terms of, understanding rights and all of that. But that was the scariest, longest time in a line marching for justice I had ever experienced. So that's my little story.
And tell me, who else was marching with you?
Students. The rest of the
And all people of color, or
No. No, this is not a color. It
I-
wasn't a color.
I understand, I just am trying to get the picture.
Yeah, it was students,
Okay,
and it was professors,
okay,
and people that were university-minded, because most universities are liberal.
Probably UCC, I believe,
Yeah,
United Campus Ministries,
Yes.
they were very
Yes.
supportive.
yes, I was involved with those.
Yeah.
I was also involved with SDS.
Oh, yeah.
and what was the SDS?
Students for a Democratic Society.
Society.
We were there.
Like I said, it was, when the earth was cooling down.
And,
dating the name
and what do you remember any of that?
I do. Okay. And even more than in graduate school at Ohio University, I was more enlightened. I mean, I was older, and I was an undergrad then,
Sure.
in '68 there. And I was just worried, where's my next beer? And
Right.
my next
yeah.
date, Am I gonna pass genetics,
Yeah, I had the same concerns.
Yeah, and so, was there an experience when you got to graduate school that,
Yeah, it was after Stonewall in '71. Stonewall, the gay liberation,
I've read
it's
about it.
very same stuff, civil rights, race, sexual orientation, and we started a gay activist alliance at Ohio University, and my partner and I, and we had just seen Stonewall in New York City on Christopher Street, 69, and we applied for a charter at Ohio University to be a recognized club, and we were turned down, and we couldn't lawfully meet, we couldn't meet as a organization. And that's when MCC let us meet in their building, so we could gather. And, that was quite an experience. And now it's a thriving organization. And we were invited down, I and this other founder, we were just invited down, last October, to, the professor invited us down, and it was,
Yeah.
To talk about.
to talk about the early days to a class of students,
And did you ever, while you were there, did you see it be recognized, or was it only recognized after you left?
after I left, yeah.
You set the groundwork though,
Yes, we did.
in dynamic times.
Yeah, we did.
And tell me the name of that group again.
Gay Activists Alliance.
Anybody else, positive times that you have engaged in justice work?
I'm sorry,
Hi.
I have to find some poster board.
Hey, hi Mike.
How you doing?
I think myself, I'm not that justice-minded,
Okay.
but I'm associated with justice through my great-granddad, who worked with John Sullivan to organize the United Mine Workers. And my daddy they went on strike, the coal mines went on strike. And my daddy was the one who held the lines and wouldn't let the scabs, they called them scabs, come through and whatnot. So I don't know, I mean, I think about justice, but
But you know the stories.
I-
It's kind of part of your DNA.
it's part of my DNA. And once, early when I was here at Pilgrim, I drove the church van, and they were folks, and I don't know if you all remember this, folks were writing obscenities and whatnot on Councilman Zimmerman's.
Yes,
No,
I remember
Zimmerman's, and they were burning
a mattress on his.
well, and they was burning a garage and something, and I think we marched from over Tremont, and when Mayor Jackson came, and that's the first time I had ever been engaged in anything like that. Made me feel like I'd really done something, but really I didn't do anything but be there.
You
and
showed
drove
up.
I showed
You
up.
showed up.
Mhm.
You showed up.
I really just think about justice. I can't say that I'm a doer.
But showing up is part of justice work.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's what John talked about, is showing up. Kathy showed up. Kathy showed up and said,
Isn't this Dave?
Dave, I'm sorry, thank you.
John's the guy behind me.
Okay.
He just
John
left.
Baptist, he's here also.
Yeah, so Dave showed up.
Mhm.
Dave said,
But they
I'm
did
gonna
a
show
little
up.
bit more. Kathy especially wasn't she organized.
she organized, but you showed up.
Mhm.
You showed up and you helped other people show up. You helped other people show up. And I think that's the other important thing with justice, is that it is not, there are those people who drive the van so people can march. There are people who sign the affidavit that says, I won't throw the brick back. There's someone who applies for it to be a recognized student organization and still meets, even though it's not a recognized student organization. And one is not better or more important than the other. They're different. They're different in what they do. And because I will tell you that my experience that came to mind when I was thinking about this was the recent DACA protest down at the park across from West Side Market. I went by myself, it was raining, and I was standing next to a young woman who was a DACA recipient. And we were listening to people tell their stories. And she said, oh, if I got up there, people wouldn't believe my story. And so I turned to her and I said, how old were you when you came? And what country did you come to? I stood there and I listened. I didn't help organize. I didn't, my life was not at risk in any way. And I think that sometimes we think justice means I have to put myself in harm's way. I have to be, if I'm not willing to do that, then I must not be doing justice work. But part of justice work is showing up.
May I say, though, you contributed because justice is listening, and that's fundamental.
As Kathy and Peggy can attest to, when I came to Pilgrim Church, coming from a small town in West Virginia, I knew nothing about the gay community. Nothing. I didn't even realize there was a gay community. And for the first gay pride parade that I participated in, I helped carry the banner, and of course my family was totally against all this, and
And so you stood up for justice.
and my picture was on the Gay Chronicles. There was me, but I felt so proud that I finally found something that I could be a part of, and
Yeah.
so that's my little story, probably more than needed.
And some of these stories kind of combine this next question, except that I'm sure you have more stories to tell, which is, how have you engaged in justice work successfully in the past? Kathy, your story of laying that groundwork says there was success in doing that. But there is success in lots of different ways. So think about how do you define if something is successful? How did it feel to be successful? What did that mean? What did that mean to be successful? Was it successful that you didn't walk away with a long-term head injury from the bricks that were being thrown at you?
Well, I wasn't concerned that much about that.
I know, because you were 20-something and you were invincible, but...
Pretty much, yeah. I was more concerned about letting my conscience down and not doing the right thing. I've always been motivated by having an inner need to do the right thing.
Okay.
Personally. I've got personal standards. Everybody else does whatever, but I've got personal standards that I have to live up to, because I'm all I got.
So doing the right thing made that successful for you.
Yes, yes. That's tough too, because I had to fight back the coward in me, because we're all cowards.
As I was probably on that day, my first march, I was probably a coward, wondering what my family was going to say and whatnot. But it was the best day of my life.
Yeah.
I remember my first march,
Mm-hmm.
and I had been a coward pretty much I worked for the Cleveland Police Department, and I was an officer for 25 years, and that's a pretty rough crowd, those officers. And I was not out. Let's put it that way. I was not out to them. But I didn't hide anything either. I just, was there. But I didn't march until I retired. But even still, I was scared. I was scared to, the officers work the event. They're at every corner. And it was hard not to turn my face away when I walked by them, but I didn't. And, so that felt good. I would say that was a success.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you something, Dave, if that's okay.
That's fine.
When you said you have this inner compulsion to do the right thing, always have,
Yes.
where does that come from?
God,
Comes from, even when you were little?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I've always had this faith of a higher being, and to try to live as Jesus wants us to live. And I learned that very, very young. And so I try to live in God's grace.
Did you learn it at church?
No,
Through your parents?
couldn't stand church. I couldn't stand organized religion. Couldn't stand it. But through people, and people are, God's messengers. I learned grace, and I learned that there was something higher, and I learned that because I was born, I was a gift. And I'm not being facetious. I'm serious. I believe this. I just believe that God has always been with me. God is always in all of us, and God moves me. So, I don't know if that answers your
Yes,
question.
it does. Thank you.
In those successful marching in your first gay pride parade, carrying the banner, marching in your first pride parade, knowing you were going to see former coworkers, how were you part of one? How were you part of one as the community?
Well, the obvious thing with marching in the Gay Pride Parade is that we're marching with Pilgrim Church,
And right, but if we take it beyond Pilgrim and the wider church, one Holy Catholic Apostolic, one being community, how and so yes, you were marching with Pilgrim, but you were marching with the LGBT community.
But yet we finally people had to see that there's a visible presence here, and maybe our congressman, maybe somebody saw us. I mean, it led to the Supreme Court saying no matter who we are, we can get married. So, and I think that was a wider thing that all of us participated in. The awareness that, other than probably just having fun and whatnot,
but no,
yeah,
that's right.
I mean, it was
The unity of their.
our
You know,
presence.
we are part. I am an ally. I am part of this. I'm part of Pilgrim. I'm part either as an ally or as a member of the LGBT community. I am part of the bigger humanity that loves.
Right.
That's what I was gonna say.
It's okay, I just was summing it up
Oh,
for
thank
you.
you, and I appreciate that.
That reminds me of a justice
Mhm.
activity that Kathy and I were involved in. There was a group of people a couple summers ago that were marching from California to Washington DC
Oh, gosh, yeah.
to draw, on foot, marching across
Yes.
the country to draw attention to climate change and our need to care for the
God's
earth.
creation.
And we knew, we kept track.
Okay.
We couldn't march,
Uh-huh.
but we kept track. And we knew what day they were gonna hit Cleveland. And we found beds for
Yeah,
how
they
many
asked us
people?
to arrange housing, and we did that.
Housing,
And then we housed a
meals.
couple of them ourselves,
Mhm.
and then there was this small little subgroup that came to our house for a meal,
Mhm.
and
Several meals.
the.
So they were
They
here.
were like locusts that came through. They had marched, I don't think they had, and they were just, whoo, they just.
Free food.